Welcome to the Boardroom Zen. I am your host, Megha Joshi. In this show, we hear the untold stories and best practices from world-class business executives on how they deal with pressure and setbacks in the boardroom and beyond. Yes, these business leaders are no superhumans, but they have found their unique formula to stay grounded and bring their A game to the table amidst the chaos. So let's begin. Today, I bring to you a special guest who is a recognized thought leader in the human resource realm. At her core, she's a risk taker with a career spanning over 20 years across corporations such as Wegmans, Xerox, Unity Health Systems, and Rochester Regional Health. Currently, she's the Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at Northeastern University, where she leads the human resource function across Canada, UK, and United States for over 10,000 faculty, staff, and research scientists. A priority for her is to increase diversity in the faculty and staff at the university. She and her wife, together with their dog Daphne, live in the Boston area since 2020. Please join me in welcoming our guest for today, Michele Grazulis. Michele, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is truly, truly a privilege to be with you, and I'm excited to have a conversation today.
Thank you, Michele. Such a privilege. Michele, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your early years and any pivotal experiences you may have had that have shaped you into the leader you are today.
It's a great question, and I often think when I interview people and I say, tell me how things started, they go back to like their childhood, right? But I do believe that some of the things that really have shaped us as business people, as leaders, really do happen in those formative years. But I think for the conversation today, I'll sort of maybe reflect a little bit on work more so than my childhood. But I mean, I guess I would say for me, something that I think that was a pivotal experience for me as a young person that I carried with me, that I still think I carry with me today, is that my parents encouraged me to be curious. And that curiosity about either people or places or even myself. And it sounds funny, but I do think that curiosity sort of has been a common theme as I've picked jobs, as I've thought about things I want to do in my life, because a genuine interest in just being curious has led me to things that I don't think I would have otherwise thought of. There's a great Disney movie, it's called Inside Out, and it focuses on sort of how core memories are shaped in us as people through experiences, and those core memories are stored in us and they carry forward. And so I think of that as sort of a core memory. If you haven't seen that movie, it's delightful. It's like a therapy session in a Disney movie, which it's just fantastic. Anyways, I think when I think about my pivotal experiences from a career perspective that have sort of shaped my life, I think one of the big ones was growing up in working. My first part-time job in high school was Wegmans Food Markets. And Wegmans, for those of us that know Wegmans, has a real core philosophy in serving the customer. And so I think I was sort of trained from day one to be focused on who are we serving in the jobs that we are fortunate enough to have and to lead and to, and when we work with people. So I think a pivotal experience was starting with them. And I've said this, 30 years later, there are things that I learned in that job that I still know I focus on today. And that carried through even to Xerox, that framed how I thought about working with customers. So one, I think it's a focus on the customer. That was truly a very pivotal experience for me. I think other pivotal experiences, not knowing what I wanted to do when I graduated from college, was my first job at Xerox was in the sales organization. And I think it is truly, truly a gift when you can learn an organization from the operational side that then you can translate into other areas. So I think the pivotal experience for me there was learning how the organization operated from a sales perspective, that then when I decided that I wanted to move into other areas, I had that framing of, well, this is how we actually make money. This is how we exist as a corporation. And then how do I impact that in a different way? That was pivotal for me. And I think anybody in their 50s starts to get more reflective, at least I have. I've become much more reflective on the reality that the pivotal experiences for me that have really framed who I am today are those that were the ones that scared me the most, and that I had to sort of jump in the deep end of the pool and say, I don't know how this is going to work out. And jobs that I've had that truly didn't have a defined job description where I got to come in and say, I'm going to create this the way I want to create this. I may get it right. I may get it wrong, but it's that sort of clean sheet of paper or the willingness to not have it defined and to trust that you will define it as you work through it.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you for sharing all those great insights, Michelle. I looked at your bio in your work experience, and the key theme that runs across all your experiences is that you've been a risk taker. You have moved around from whether it's retail and sales to technology to healthcare and now education. And that speaks to your ability to be able to operate amidst chaos and being able to operate despite the fear that you may be experiencing. And that's such an interesting, trait that I see as a common theme across a lot of top executives that I interview and have worked with. And that's phenomenal. So I just want to call that out. And
Thank you. Thank you.
and as we dig more into your life experiences and things that are meaningful, I'd love to ask if there is one particular word that could describe you as a person, as a leader, what would that be and why?
Oh God, it would depend on who you ask on any given day. And I want to come back to something you said just a minute ago too, because I do think, there's something to be said for, whether it's fear or it's curiosity or whatever it is. I do think that, as I reflect on my career, one of the best gifts has been to not let fear hold me back. And I think it's so easy to do that. And I think it's easier for women to do that, right? Because we don't want to mess up, because we're afraid if we mess up, we've not only messed it up for ourselves, but we've messed it up for anybody. But in any event, let's come back to that. Let me answer the question you asked, which is one word. If I had to really distill it down to one word, I would probably say, and it's not anything, deep, it's probably energetic. And I used to honestly hate that about myself, because I was probably back in the 70s when I was growing up. Now they would have probably diagnosed me with ADD. It was hyperactivity then, but it was this constant need to be moving and doing and thinking. And there were times where I've not liked that about myself, because I thought, oh my God, why can't I just settle? And why can't I just sort of be content? And that energy has always propelled me to discontent in a really good and effective way, because I have found that I've never wanted to do jobs. I've never been one who said, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to have change. I thrive on change. And I think that energy is what allows me to do that. It also is what can be exhausting. And so I have to really manage it well. But I think it's the one word I would use to describe myself. I think my kids would say that about me. I think probably my wife would say it about me. I'm sure the people outside these walls today would say it about me. But I try to harness it too, so it doesn't become an issue.
Yes. Wow. And that really struck a chord with me, Michelle, because that reminded me of my early years while I was in school and college, and my closest friends used to call me Energizer Bunny. And as bizarre it was, I know why they said that, because I was always walking around with many, many checklists during the course of the day.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure I was making the very best of the time I had. And I always was intending to harness that energy and the time I had in the best possible way. And over the years, I also struggled with it, because I could never calm down or be centered. I would always be in this hyper anxious state. And sometimes higher levels of energy can turn out to work in as a disadvantage, if you will, because sometimes people with lower levels of energy may see you as intimidating or overpowering, and so you have to really manage it appropriately for you to optimize that energy. So I know exactly what you're saying, and over the years for me, my hack has been mindfulness and meditation that allows me to ground myself in those moments and manage my energy in the best possible way.
Yeah, I completely empathize with what you're saying. And I'm sure, like me, you probably had those moments too, where you felt like it was something you actually had to change about yourself. And that's hard too, because it isn't, depending on the receiver of it, it can be perceived as being such an affront to someone's sort of personal space. So there is a lot of self-calibration that we have to do. But like you, mindfulness and yoga and those sorts of things have helped me in my life manage stress and manage, the natural anxiety that comes from being a high achiever and high energy. Um, and I think those tools are things that help you actually know yourself better, at least in my experience. So kudos to you for finding those things as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Michelle. And that brings me into the topic of rituals. And I, as a person, have been big in curating my own rituals, whether it's my morning
Hmm.
ritual or my evening ritual. And that just allows me to clear my mind and get into
Yeah.
those self aware, high productivity spaces. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
have this. I was actually reading this book called Daily Rituals, where a lot of geniuses of the world have been described and their morning rituals have been described. And it's
So
fascinating
interesting.
as I read that book. But I'm really curious to see if you have any rituals or practices
Yeah.
that you turn to.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, yoga and meditation. And I know it's sort of very, I don't know, of the moment to talk about meditation. And I resisted meditation for so long because I actually didn't think I had the patience to sit long enough to do it. But I say this to people all the time, and I think it's true. I think the universe shows us things when we're supposed to see it. And so, yoga and meditation would pop into my life at different times. But it wasn't until I was in my early 30s when I felt like I was losing sort of that centeredness of being in my life. I had two young kids. It was a crazy time. I was coming out. It was just, there was a lot going on in my life, and I needed something that actually forced me to stop and think. So for me, yoga and meditation later. And I used to be able to do more yoga because I was more limber when I was young. So my yoga practice now is much more reflective and not as energetic as it used to be. But in any event, yoga for me has been that sort of grounding force. And I was just in yoga on Sunday and I put my head on the mat. And it's almost like now it's become automatic where I just start to breathe differently and I start to center myself differently. And I have a completely different awareness of the world around me. So I have been so grateful. And the person I practiced under most in New York had this expression, and I just shared this with someone the other day. She said, "When did yoga find you and when did you find yoga?" And I think that's actually all credit to Carly Weiss for that question at Breathe Yoga. But it was a question that sort of struck me because I thought she's right. I found yoga and I did the practices of it. But it wasn't until it actually sort of embedded itself in me where I realized, oh, I'm relying on that breathing when I get stressed. And I found myself as I get ready to do presentations and stuff often where if I literally go by myself, stand alone and do some really deep breathing, my head is clearer, my thoughts are clearer. I'm able to speak authentically and honestly without that sort of like revved up energy back to the energetic. So that's been a ritual for me. Now I will tell you the rituals for me with work are like many other, I think, executives and leaders. I relish my morning time. I love to come in mostly before everybody's here. I still come into the office, even though we're now in this post-COVID hybrid world. I like to get up super early in the morning. I get up at 5 o'clock. The ritual for me is to do some form of exercise. I always said I'm like a stallion at the, well, not a stallion. Like, let's just say I'm an old horse now, but at some point I feel like I'm a force at the gate that has to run that energy out before I can actually center on the day. And I equate it to our dog. Like if we don't walk our dog in the morning, she's bananas. And I'm very similar to that. Like I have to get that energy out. And then I do Wordle every day. I like to challenge my brain that way, which is now a new thing. But it truly is, to answer the question at a higher level, it really is that grounding few moments by myself, because I know the minute I walk in the door, my time is not my own. And so I have to be in a good place to be able to give up myself to my team, which they have every right to expect from me. And so I really relish that. And then I love to be here late after everyone's left and I can get all the stuff done that I didn't get to get done during the day because I was engaging and being with people, which I love. So for me, it's that bookending my day with time alone. And then, having a very happy and full life with my wife and my dog are also things that help, and my kids. But it really is those rituals of the yoga. It really is. It's the one thing that has kept me sane, I think, through 30 years of working.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, Michelle, you are a powerhouse. What do you eat, by the way, to give you
Ah,
this level of energy?
well, That's never been a problem. Yeah, it's never been a problem. But yeah, no, you're very sweet to say that. But yeah, I just feel very gifted that I have, and I hope I have this energy for the rest of my life because I can't imagine what it would be like to not have.
I have to say, I feel exactly the same way about yoga. I have been practicing yoga for about 15 years now.
Mhm.
I stumbled into meditation over 3 years ago amidst
Yeah,
the pandemic, and I give all due credit to the pandemic for getting me into the mindfulness and meditation realm because there was not much to do out there in the world,
I know.
and it got
I
really
know.
depressing. And that's when I turned to meditation. And just like you, I never thought I could calm down my mind ever. But having said that, the power of meditation, it's unbelievable how
Yeah,
quickly it can bring your level of energy in your mind to a state where you can be so much more creative and
yeah.
effective at what you do. And
Well, and it's so, I think it's so important in workspaces, whatever space you work in, to create the opportunity for people to embrace that. I think, you know, having worked in corporate environments and then not for profit environments, there clearly are some cultural differences. And I think it also depends on generationally when you sort of were brought up in the workspace. I was brought up in the early 90s and so, that it was there were certain norms and things. And I think we were, and I also feel this as a female, I was encouraged to mask some of my own emotion and exuberance, which is authentically who I am. I'm a deep feeler. And if I'm not able to do that, then I'm not bringing my authentic self to work. And so I think it's really important. And I think the pandemic, as you said, really created a different level of awareness. One, we saw into our colleagues' lives in a different way than we ever had before. And we also found ways to connect in ways that we hadn't before. Like we did something with one of the teams where we did a virtual yoga class with these people that I work with. And we were all on the floor in our respective spaces. We had our cameras on and we were doing yoga. And honestly, it created a sense of community that I worry about that as a human resources professional. How do we maintain culture and environment and connection and engagement in this world that is forever shifting? And so there are new ways for us to try to do that, but it requires an openness and an encouragement to say, feel, express, engage in a different way. So I totally agree so much with what you said. And I think it's just a powerful, powerful practice.
yes,
So
yes, more power to yoga and mindfulness.
yeah, absolutely.
So, Michelle, I'm going to ask a hypothetical question now. And so play
Sure.
along. Let's
Okay.
imagine you're at this grand cocktail party at a mansion and you're moving around with your lovely cocktails, sipping it and networking with new, wonderful people. And suddenly you come across this woman who is 30 years old. And surprisingly, this woman looks just like you. She's actually a
Mhm.
30-year-old version of you, a younger version of you. In that moment, having lived this experience, this life experience that you have, what would you tell your younger self?
My God, what an incredible question. And what an amazing thing to think about being able to do, honestly. Like, I have to think about that. But I guess so. I'm immediately struck with the visual in my head is I sometimes see my daughter and I think, oh my God, I'm actually trying to tell her all the things that I wish I told myself, right? I guess, wow. I think, one of the first things I would say to my younger self is don't worry so much. Like you don't have to have it all figured out. And I know these sound probably to the listeners, like things that anybody might say, but I think I can only speak to my experience, and my experience is the amount of energy I put into worrying about how things were going to work out versus how they have worked out. I never could have predicted this trajectory for myself. I was not someone who thought I want to be a CHRO, I want to be a chief development officer. I honestly never had that mindset. So I couldn't have even envisioned it. So one, I would say to my younger self, don't worry so much. Don't be so afraid. It will all work out. I think I would encourage my younger self to have found yoga earlier in her life, right? So that she could have been less anxious about things that there was no reason to be anxious about. I think I would tell my younger self to trust that, career paths aren't vertical, they're horizontal, and you're going to be provided with experiences and opportunities that might not make sense to other people. Don't worry about, when I left sales to go into HR, I had so many colleagues telling me that I was stupid that I had ended my career in essence because I was stepping off that hamster wheel, and I was, there was so much angst over that, and I would tell my younger self to turn out the noise, turn down the noise and listen to what your heart is telling you. I think I would tell my younger self to take more risks. You describe me as a risk taker, but the truth is I wouldn't describe myself that way. I truly wouldn't. So I would probably have been an entrepreneur if I could do it over again too, and really kind of just find that Zen passion that drives me. I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do, and it fulfills me. So I don't have regrets. And I think, God, what a great question. And I know these are like, this is probably in the Proust questionnaire at the end of Vanity Fair too. It's like, what would you tell your younger self? And I think I would, in the end, want my younger self to really trust, to learn earlier on to trust my own instincts, right? I think there are so many voices that come at us either in our personal lives or in our careers that tell us to question. And I would tell my younger self to just stop and really listen to what your gut is saying and follow that, because I truly believe, and I say that to my team all the time, what is your gut telling you? Your gut should be informed by fact and your gut should be informed by experience, but what's your gut telling you? And then don't ignore that, because that genuinely is probably what your true self is telling you feels real. So lovely question. And I wish that I could meet that 30-year-old again. And maybe at some point in my journey beyond this life, I will. But what a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Thank you, Michelle. What great insight. So I heard worry less, practice yoga, trust your heart, trust your instincts, and take more risks. Your wisdom is literally outpouring in this conversation. So thank you. With that, the last question I would ask you is, you worked in the corporate world as well as now in the education sector. And you yourself are a high power executive. From what you've seen, working in the human resource world and in all across different industries, what's that one thing that separates an exceptional executive from an average mediocre one?
Let me say this. I've had the distinct benefit and privilege of working with some really incredible leaders in my career and some executives that are just exceptional. And I'm grateful for that. And a lot of really strong female executives too, which has just been and some incredible male executives who mentored me and gave me opportunities. And so I probably would pull something from each one of them to say, this is what I saw in them. But if you forced me to say, what is that, those one or two things, I guess what speaks to me is humility. And I think humility is an underrated virtue. I think that when you have humility about yourself, about the world, about other people, there is a level of automatic self-awareness that comes to you, and you can say, okay, wait, let me just make sure that I'm actually seeing this, whatever it is, from my perspective and from the other person's perspective. And it takes humility and humbleness to do that. And bringing things full circle, right? The biggest lesson I learned from Wegmans was, and I credit Danny Wegman with this, he would say, there's no one in any one of our levels of management who can't pick up a broom and sweep the floor if we need to. And so there was that expectation of, we're never above anybody else in our work. So I think that I look for that. And I think the other one word that comes to my mind is authenticity. I think, people try on lots of personas of who they should be and how they're supposed to act. And I think, there's volumes of books written about what makes a leader a leader. But I think true leaders who are authentically themselves create followership. I think, people will get behind a leader if they feel like they don't necessarily have it all figured out, but they are authentically who they are. I trust them. Authenticity builds trust. So I think to me, those things matter because there's a whole waterfall of things that come from those characteristics. And where I've seen leaders that I would say I don't aspire to follow, it's because I don't think I can trust them. And it's because I don't actually feel like I know them. So that's my experience. And my hope is that I attempt to emulate that as best I can in leading people, because otherwise it's not real and it's not fun. And it's also not, it doesn't build connection and glue. And that's truly what I feel matters. It's why I work. I mean, I love what I do, but I love the people I work with.
Yes. And those two traits you mentioned, Michelle, humility and authenticity, they are so pivotal. And they're also very Zen-like traits, I have to say, because they truly allow us to let our true self shine and make that human
Yeah.
connection with those around us. And that's what
I
mobilizes
so agree with you.
everything else around us. With that, any closing thoughts you may have, Michelle, for the group
Yeah.
here?
Well, I mean, I guess I want to say this to you because I applaud what you're doing, and I applaud the topic of sort of the boardroom zen and being resilient as humans. I mean, I think that's sort of truly the conversations that get at the deeper level of, hey, we're all trying to survive. We're all trying to find ways to navigate work and life and all the things that get thrown at us. And I truly appreciate and respect that you're trying to elevate the discussion to more of a, okay, let's learn about the sort of other things that people do to ground themselves and bring themselves to work. So hats off to you for this. And I am grateful that you thought me worthy of the conversation. It's been a lot of fun. And I hope it's a dialogue that we get to continue beyond the podcast. I really do.
There is no better time than now to build resilience, lead mindfully, and with purpose. We all deserve to live our very best life. This show is brought to you by The Resilient Human, a company on a mission to develop authentic leaders that thrive amidst pressure and have the courage to write their own story. A sincere thanks to all my listeners for the precious time and presence. If you genuinely enjoyed the show, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. Be well, and I can't wait to see you at the next episode of The Boardroom Zen.